Okay, welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. My name is Bob Bianchi. I'll be taking it from 12 to 3. Guys, you know if it's the Law and Crime Network, we're the only network that's out there, Dan Abrams Production, that's doing gavel-to-gavel coverage on multiple trials. And boy, we just came off a hot trial last week, and we are back on the saddle again with 2 hot cases. Okay, just a little spat there. Kirk Burkhalter is a professor at New York Law, 20 years experience in the NYPD, detective first grade, has done long-term investigations, organized crime, and criminal enterprises, as well as terrorism investigations. He is a professor par excellence, and we love having him on. Kirk, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's break this down a little bit, because it's a little difficult to understand when you're dealing murder for hire. So Magbanwa is kind of the middle person, as we indicated. The person she was just on the phone with is Garcia, who is a defendant that's on trial as well. Magbanwa was also involved romantically with Charlie Adelson, okay? Now, who's Charlie Adelson? He is the brother of the woman who married Dan Markel, who was the victim. Okay, so we can kind of move around a little bit with these players. There was a bitter custody battle that was going on, and it is alleged by the state that Magbanwa, acting on behalf of the Adelsons, solicited or involved Garcia, who we just listened to, who is also a boyfriend of hers, to commit this murder with another individual who has pled guilty and is now a cooperating witness for the state. Whew, it's a lot to get out. Now, I understand that you've actually done murder for hire investigations as an undercover police officer. Tell us about that and what you're making with regard to this tape.
Sure. So moons ago in my other life, when I was employed by the New York City Police Department, in an undercover capacity, I worked as in a murder for hire case where I actually had someone hire me to murder someone. So,
and somebody, by the way, who was a very well-respected public figure, may I add?
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. So what's interesting here, and I say interesting from a legal standpoint, not to minimize what occurred to the victim, but in a conspiracy like this, the more people that are involved, the more likely it is that one of the co-conspirators is going to get nervous, which we just heard on the tape, and flip. So when you have murder for hire, it starts out with solicitation, someone merely asking, can you do X, Y, Z? And pretty much in most jurisdictions, a person is criminally liable once those words leave their mouth. But once we get to the conspiracy phase, there has to be an agreement. Folks have to intend to agree. And then you have to get the conspirators to engage in some overt acts.
I see. Now, only here at the Law and Crime Network, and we have guests like you that not only did this job as an undercover officer, but also as a professor at a law school, and is so important that it's not just the agreement, right? It's an overt act. Can you explain that a little bit?
Certainly. So, from a law enforcement point of view, what you want to do is get the defendant to provide you information, perhaps a phone number, license plates, photos, maps, you name it, anything, even the weapons, the tools of the crime. And so that would be considered an overt act. It doesn't have to go all the way to completion or even substantially close to completion, but just an act to show that this person actually intends that this crime be committed.
Right. And prosecutors love that conspiracy charge because it doesn't have to be a completed act. But if you have a completed act, then of course you charge conspiracy as well as the substantive crime.
Absolutely. Now, if you don't have an undercover officer involved and you have a conspiracy like this where folks were involved and they committed the crime, what tends to happen is once the targets become a little hot, meaning that they believe law enforcement is looking at them, everyone gets nervous. And that's what you just heard on this phone call. Hey, provide me some comfort. It sounds like you are okay. I want to make sure I'm okay. And then what follows that? Well, if I go down, you'll go down. And that's where the conspiracy starts to unravel, and hence law enforcement getting all types of evidence, like the recordings that we just heard.
Right. Now, interestingly, in this case, folks, Magbanwa was also offered immunity in the case if she gave information. She refused to do that. And as the prosecutor put it, she has the keys in her hand as far as getting out of jail. Very interesting case. Let's listen to a little bit more. There's a lot of wiretaps here. And there's also wiretaps involving Charlie Adelson that was just covered. Maybe we'll cover that later on, but was covered earlier with Jesse Weber. And they're all talking in code and very odd after the murder. And seriously, regardless of whether or not somebody says, I did it, this is the kind of activity that jurors are looking at, and from the standpoint of common sense are saying, they're definitely knee deep in this. Let's listen to a little bit more of the wiretap. Okay, Professor, so we can't, it's worth repeating over and over again because it's complex. This is a phone call between Magbanwa and Charlie Adelson. And Charlie Adelson's sister was the wife of the victim, Dan Markel, the Florida State University law professor, okay, and that contentious custody battle. What do you make of it? Let's make sure our audience understands one thing. After this murder, these wiretaps and the phone records that the government was able to retrieve show multiple phone calls going between Magbanwa and Garcia, who's an alleged triggerman in this case,
right,
and Magbanwa and Charlie Adelson. I mean, it's like lots going on. What are you making of all of this?
Well, the first thing that strikes me is if you were to create a flow chart on a blackboard, there would be only one person that ties all these people together, and that would be the victim. Why else would they have all these phone calls? And I'm just amazed at the nature of the conversations. It reminds me of the organized crime cases from 20 years ago where the defendants always convicted themselves. So all these, the problem with speaking in code is that if you use the same code over and over, then it's really not a code. So it's very clear that they are talking about something that occurred and after the fact and being nervous and the note being passed to the mother and such. They're not calling to say, hello, what was the score in the baseball game? How are you? Did you go to the beach? Every conversation is about the same thing.
Right, and for the folks in the audience out there that are listening for our true crime aficionados in the chat room, Charlie Adelson has not been charged with any criminal wrongdoing. However, prosecutors are pushing this information to say Magbanwa was the middle person, if you will, and that the motive was over this custody battle. So that is why these tapes are allowed to be played in court. Again, law enforcement having done an excellent job at dotting I's and crossing T's and pulling out every investigative tool in order to build this case, which by my estimation is pretty strong. So if you want to see the gavel-to-gavel coverage of these great trials, there's only one place to be. That's here. So we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere.